You may have thought it was a game, but it was also a test. A test! Sent out across the universe to find those with the gift to be starfighters.
Surely you remember the moment Alex Rogan stood before the Starfighter arcade cabinet, unleashing a record-breaking barrage across the galaxy. The way a trailer park kid suddenly became the only hope for an interstellar empire used to drive me absolutely wild. But shortly after, I was stunned to realise that the flamboyant mentor, Centauri, was actually a fast-talking shill with a silver tongue. Behind these neon-lit frames lie countless fascinating secrets. Did you know that the Death Blossom weapon actually caused the world's most powerful supercomputer to freeze? Or that the Beta unit suit nearly made the actor faint on set? And if I revealed that behind those sleek space battles was a reckless CGI gamble, you'd realise that the Last Starfighter was built on insane ambitions and legendary system crashes. Now, let's set aside the grand dogfights to uncover 20 hilarious secrets about the film that pioneered the visual effects revolution of the 20th century. The Starfighter uniform, a mobile sauna. Remember the moment Alex Rogan first donned the Starfighter uniform? With its sharp angles and rugged helmet, he looked like a legendary pilot stepped straight out of every kid's dream. However, behind that cool exterior was a sweaty reality. Constructed from thick materials to achieve that cinematic sheen, the suit had zero ventilation. Lance Guest confessed that after just a few minutes under the scorching studio lights, they felt like they were being cooked in a microwave. The funniest part was the helmet. It was so airtight that whenever the visor snapped shut, the actors could hear nothing but their own heavy breathing. Within minutes, condensation would fog up the glass completely. To keep the heroes from passing out, the crew had to station a team nearby with fans and water straws to keep them hydrated between takes. 19. Using a monster supercomputer and the shocking CGI leap. The dogfight between the Gunstar and the Kodan fleet remains incredibly impressive. With over 250,000 polygons per frame, the Gunstar was a digital dream materialised from the arcade screen. The powerhouse behind those frames was the Cray XMP, the most powerful supercomputer on the planet at the time. The witty secret here? This machine was so formidable it was usually reserved for global weather forecasting or simulating weapons at the Pentagon. Yet filmmakers turned it into a painter for a sci-fi flick. However, this miracle nearly turned the production into a disaster. Remember the ultimate weapon, the Death Blossom, where the ship spins and fires across the cosmos? To render that scene, the Cray had to work until it was out of breath. The light trails and swirling explosions were so complex that the machine repeatedly hung and froze. Beta Unit and Lance Guest's rubber nightmare. Remember the Beta Unit? The awkward android clone Centauri left on Earth to play Alex Rogan. He constantly mimicked human behaviour with a forced smile, stiff movements, and a head that occasionally spun around. Originally, Beta wasn't a major character. He was written as a quick gag. But when test audiences saw him, they went crazy for his clueless humour. Consequently, the producers immediately expanded Beta's role with a series of new scenes. For Lance Guest, this decision was hell. By the time he was called back for reshoots, Lance had already cut his hair. As a result, he had to wear a stiff wig that looked completely unnatural under the studio lights. Worse yet, the thick, hot rubber makeup trapped so much heat that Lance nearly fainted on set. To top it off, Lance was sick during most of the shoot. Imagine crawling into a layer of rubber while running a fever, trying to act clumsy while your body is in full-scale revolt. The secret behind Centauri, the departure of a legend. You surely remember Centauri, the recruiter with the sharp suit, sly grin, and a silver tongue who lured Alex away from the trailer park and into the stars. But there's a secret you might not know. This role was tailor-made for one man only, Robert Preston. Audiences of that era loved Preston as Harold Hill in The Music Man, a fast-talking salesman with a mischievous glint in his eye. Centauri was essentially the space-age version of Harold Hill, a high-end con-man turned cosmic guide. The result? Preston's charisma gave the film an irresistible heartbeat. Bittersweetly, this role as the galactic salesman was the final performance of Robert Preston's career. When Centauri's star car vanishes into the void at the end of the film, it serves as a legend's final curtain call. The Secret of Master. Grigg's appearance, when it comes to Alex's most reliable companion, looked no further than Grigg, the alien pilot with the toothy grin. Have you ever wondered how that wrinkly, glossy skin and those big, round eyes look so lifelike? The secret lay in the suffering of actor Dan O'Herlihy. To transform into Grigg, he endured a grueling 4-hour makeup ordeal. Grigg's entire head was actually a thick, rigid rubber mask, so stiff that Dan couldn't move his face at all. To express emotion, Dan had to learn how to use remote-controlled prosthetics. Most hilariously, he had to practice smiling with his nose and cheeks just to keep the mask from falling off. Intergalactic friendship is noble, but the price for an alien standard look is sometimes a paralysed face for the entire day. Fifth and villain Jour's failed brain fry. Does anyone remember Jour? The traitorous prince who wielded a powerful scepter and sowed terror throughout the Kodan fleet. He looked evil enough, but behind-the-scenes secrets reveal he almost became a butcher. Originally, to prove his brutality, Jour performed a gruesome act. He used his scepter to fry a spy's brain right on screen. The footage was graphic, featuring glowing skin and blood-curdling screams. However, to keep the film's PG rating, the director had to edit the scene down. The result? In the film, we only see a flash of red light cross the victim's forehead for a split second. 14. Centauri's star car, cosmic luxury, or a bucket of bolts with a body kit. Remember the moment the flamboyant recruiter Centauri pulls up in that star car, with its sleek curves, neon lights, and those proud upward-opening gull-wing doors? Seeing the way it streaks away, anyone would think it was a vehicle fit for transporting Starfighter warriors, but this car was a literal mechanical nightmare. On set, it was noisy, clunky, and embarrassingly slow. Every time the director called for an impressive entrance, the entire crew had to wrestle with the machinery just to keep this supercar rolling in a straight line without stalling midway. The funniest part was the legendary gull-wing doors, the ultimate symbol of galactic wealth, which frequently jammed, making Centauri look like he was trapped in a tin can. The fiberglass body would rattle and clank at the slightest breeze. Consequently, the lightning speed you see on screen was actually the product of clever camera angles and the masterful editing of the post-production team. 13. The real-life Starfighter machine. I still remember that buzzing sensation walking out of the theatre in 1984. After witnessing Alex Rogan change his life by breaking the record on that arcade cabinet, I had one dream: to find that Starfighter machine at a local pizza parlour or bowling alley and wait for aliens to pick me up. But here's the secret. Arcade cabinets that perfectly simulated the battles in the movie were actually built as prototypes by Atari. However, the video game crash of 1983 exhausted the Atari empire and the project was mercilessly killed off. For years afterward, fans chased rumours of a machine that never truly existed. It wasn't until 6 years later that a glimmer of hope appeared in the form of a NES cartridge titled The Last Starfighter. But alas, it was a cruel hoax. Instead of high-octane dogfights, it was actually just an old game called Uridium that had been sloppily reskinned. 12 Will Wheaton, from abandoned boy to a new legend. Among Louis's friends, there was a brown-haired kid working incredibly hard to land a few lines on screen. If you're a Star Trek fan, you'll easily recognize him. That invisible kid was Will Wheaton, the boy who would later gain global fame as Wesley Crusher. In reality, Will Wheaton had memorized the script and performed with extreme passion before the lens. However, life is not always a dream. When the movie hit theaters, almost all of Will's scenes and lines were vaporized without mercy to trim the runtime. Yet, just 2 years later, that boy landed a lead role in the masterpiece Stand By Me, followed by a seat on the bridge of the Enterprise. Turns out that sometimes being forgotten in one film is the magical stepping stone to becoming an icon in another. 11. The idea started with a screenwriter. Watching an arcade game. Surely everyone here remembers the feeling of standing before those bulky arcade machines, eyes glued to the dancing pixels, praying you wouldn't hit game over. That was the true origin of The Last Starfighter. Screenwriter Jonathan R. Bituel, while observing a teenager tirelessly grinding for a high score with fiery eyes, came up with a crazy question. What if this wasn't just a game? The idea was so bold that even Universal was hesitant at the time. But humorously, the arcade craze sweeping through America back then made it impossible for them to ignore. Millions of kids were tossing their last quarters into machines, and Bituel's script turned that pointless obsession into a legendary work. 10. From posh suburbs to a gritty trailer park. Remember the sun-drenched, windswept, starlight, starbright trailer park where Alex Rogan lived with his mother and brother? That slightly dilapidated but warm feeling became the soul of the film. However, Alex Rogan was originally supposed to be a true suburbanite. In early drafts, Alex's story took place in a lush suburb with pristine white fences and perfectly manicured lawns. But Universal suddenly panicked. Hey! This looks too much like the kid Elliot from E.T., not wanting to be labelled an imitator of the neighbour boy looking at the stars. Jonathan Bituel threw Alex straight into a dusty trailer park, placing his family in the survival struggle of the working class. Wittily enough, it was that poor trailer park that created the most loyal fan community. Alex wasn't just escaping alien monsters, he was making a leap out of poverty. 9. The lead couple was almost not Lance Guest and Catherine Mary Stewart. Do you remember Alex Rogan's gentle, slightly clueless but determined face when he first stepped into the Gunstar cockpit? Or Maggie's sun-drenched smile? It's hard to imagine anyone else in those roles, but Hollywood almost turned The Last Starfighter into a showcase for much bigger names. The secret is that Lance Guest wasn't Universal's first choice. The first person to catch their eye was Michael J. Fox, who was taking the world by storm with Family Ties. But it was his grueling sitcom filming schedule that tethered him down, rather than letting him fly into the galaxy. Even Eric Stoltz auditioned and almost became the ace pilot before eventually starring in Back to the Future. Even the role of Maggie was a big question mark, as hot names like Jennifer Jason Leigh were considered. Ultimately, instead of picking A-list stars, the director put his faith in Catherine Mary Stewart. 8. James Cameron almost piloted the Gunstar. Can you imagine a galactic battle? In The Last Starfighter, filled with gritty machinery and suffocating tension? You probably never pictured it. But before Nick Castle signed the contract, Universal had actually invited James Cameron to direct. At the time, Cameron was looking for a major sci-fi project. However, a busy schedule pulled him in a different direction. This is one of those what-if theories that keeps sci-fi fans awake at night. If Cameron had directed, the film might have been darker, more violent, and the CGI would certainly have been even more terrifying. But in the end, we got a different composition under Nick Castle's hand. An optimistic fairy tale where video games are a doorway to dreams, rather than a signature Cameron-esque mechanical nightmare. 7. Alex and Maggie weren't always. Alex and Maggie. Do the names Alex Rogan and Maggie Gordon sound very simple and familiar to you? Well, we were supposed to be calling them Skip and Penny. In the earliest drafts, the young couple bore names that sounded incredibly childish. Skip and Penny sounds like two characters from a Saturday morning cartoon, not teenagers struggling with life in a trailer park. Fortunately, director Nick Castle was extremely allergic to this. To him, The Last Starfighter wasn't a superficial entertainment piece. It was a story about ordinary people pushed into extraordinary circumstances. He insisted on changing them to more realistic names to create the most authentic feel possible. 6. The globe logo almost turned into the planet Rylos. Do you remember that familiar feeling whenever a Universal film begins? The Earth spinning slowly with the text moving across it. But in 1984, the brains behind The Last Starfighter wanted to replace the Earth with the planet Rylos. This bold idea aimed to push the audience straight into space from the very first second. They wanted to declare, "Forget Earth, you're in Starfighter territory now." However, Universal executives immediately shook their heads. To them, the logo was a sacred brand symbol. Never touch the globe was an absolute rule. They feared the audience would wonder in confusion, why does Earth suddenly look so weird? Ultimately, the plan was scrapped, and the film still had to open with the familiar old Earth. 5. The Gunstar ship was entirely digital. If the X-Wings or Millennium Falcon from Star Wars made audiences marvel at the detail from thousands of physical parts, the Gunstar stunned people with a completely different kind of beauty. Remember its sleek, angular symmetry and modern look as it glided through space? The secret lies in the genius of Ron Cobb, the man who moulded the soul of masterpieces like Alien and Conan the Barbarian. Instead of following the old path of kit bashing with plastic and glue, Cobb designed the Gunstar and rendered it entirely within a computer. Wittily, while other ships of the time were worried about parts falling off if they were bumped on set, the Gunstar existed solely as algorithms and polygons. When it appeared in the CGI sequences, it brought a sense of the future that was surreal. 4. When Marvel Comics took over The Last Starfighter. In an era when VHS tapes were expensive, how could a kid re-watch Alex Rogan's heroic battles after leaving the theatre? The answer was at the newsstands, where Marvel Comics promptly released a 3-issue comic book adaptation in 1984. The Last Starfighter had the honour of standing alongside masterpieces like Labyrinth, Blade Runner and Raiders of the Lost Ark by being reimagined by Marvel. For fans at the time, this was the only way they could get a close-up look at Ron Cobb's sleek Gunstar designs. Marvel, already strong in the vast universe department, took the opportunity to expand on some scenes that were cut from the film. The vibrant pages didn't just recreate the movie, they infused it with a superhero flavour. Over time, this mini-series has become a relic sought after by collectors. 3. The Empire Dream vanishes and the shadow of Star Wars behind the scenes of The Last Starfighter. Universal was actually harbouring a massive ambition. They wanted to create their own Star Wars. The big bosses dreamed of sold-out toy shelves, endless sequels, and a commercial empire stretching from Earth to the planet Rylos. Everything was planned meticulously. Toy prototypes were sketched. However, when the box office numbers started rolling in, that dream shattered. Although the film grossed $28.7 million worldwide, doubling its initial $15 million budget, compared to George Lucas's Giant, the figure was too small. The commercial plan went up in smoke. Despite the CGI technology, the film couldn't escape the massive shadow of Star Wars. Instead of becoming a galaxy-dominating empire, it chose a humbler path, becoming a cult classic. 2. The Loser that became a late-night legend. After leaving theatres in the summer of 1984, the fate of The Last Starfighter seemed destined to fade into obscurity. Yet humorously, it was resurrected through the inventions of the time, VHS tapes and cable TV. Audiences who missed the film in theatres suddenly discovered it right in their living rooms late at night. They obsessively rewound the brilliant CGI battles, memorised Robert Preston's witty lines, and began dreaming that one day, a high score on an arcade machine would change their lives. By the 90s, the film had made a leap, becoming a cult classic. It turns out that The Last Starfighter never conquered the box office, but it conquered something much more important: the long game of time. Alex Rogan may not have brought Universal a billion-dollar empire, but he won an eternal place in the memory of every child who ever dreamed of the stars. 1. When the Gunstar became a military textbook, did you ever think a movie about a gamer kid could catch the attention of real military experts? The way Alex Rogan piloted the Gunstar ship through a computer interface unintentionally predicted the future of modern warfare. In the mid-80s, while real pilots were still struggling with dozens of physical buttons and mechanical levers, The Last Starfighter showcased a brand new concept, using a visual digital interface to control weapons. Military researchers at the Pentagon back then watched the film and started wondering, why don't we train pilots by turning airplanes into a giant video game? The truth is, technologies we see today, like VR headsets for fighter pilots or drone control stations with controllers resembling a PlayStation, all draw a bit of inspiration from Alex Rogan's pilot seat. What was once considered child's play on screen was actually an early blueprint for how humans operate machinery in the 21st century. Looking back at the journey of The Last Starfighter, we see a film built not only from the first digital polygons, but also from the sweat inside Lance Guest's rubber suit, the boss-rejected ideas of Nick Castle, and the final charisma of legend Robert Preston. From an outlier overshadowed by Star Wars, the film made a spectacular comeback through old VHS tapes to prove a witty truth. In cinema, it's not always the one with the massive budget or toys in every store that wins. Sometimes, all you need is a pure heart, a bit of technological daring, and an arcade game powerful enough to change fate. Our journey to decode 20 painful secrets ends here. I hope this article has helped you see your favourite film through a more interesting and humorous lens. Do you want me to uncover more mind-blowing facts about another legend? Drop a comment below.